Welcome back to Ancient Echoes, where myth and memory meet. I'm Chelsea, and in today's episode, we journey into the heart of Greek mythology, to the edge of chaos and the dawn of divine order. We'll trace the tangled lineage of gods and monsters, explore the ancient Greek creation myth, and examine the striking parallels it shares with a much more familiar story, the biblical flood. Before there were gods, there were humans. Before there were mountains, oceans, or even time itself, there was chaos. But let's be clear, this isn't the modern idea of chaos. This wasn't just a messy room or Monday mornings without coffee. No. Chaos in Greek myth was the vast, gaping void, a chasm of formless nothingness. Not evil, not darkness, just potential. Emptiness waiting to become something. And then things started to take shape. Out of chaos, the first primordial beings emerged. These weren't yet gods as we think of them, but raw forces of existence. Gaia, the earth, solid, life-giving, maternal. Tartarus, the abyss, a shadowy pit deep below the world, darker than Hades itself. And Eros, love. Not Cupid with a bow and arrow, but cosmic desire itself. The force that brings things together, that urges creation forward. Think of Eros as the original gravity, or maybe the universe's first matchmaker. With Eros came the power to unite, to pull being out of non-being. And once love enters the picture, well, things start getting weird, in the best mythological way. From chaos also sprang Nyx, or night, and Erebus, or darkness. And like any mythological siblings, of course, they got together. Their union gave birth to Hemera, the day, and Ether, the bright upper air. And then Night, who you think of as the ancient world's goth aunt, decided she didn't need Erebus anymore. She started crafting a whole generation of beings on her own. Thanatos, death, Hypnos, sleep, Moros, doom, Nemesis, Eris, strife, and even Philodes, pleasure. Basically, Night was out here creating the entire Greek version of the Inside Out cast, plus a few that definitely would have made it PG-13. Meanwhile, Gaia, our Earth Mother, gave birth to Uranus, the sky. And in true mythic fashion, he became her consort. The earth and sky were joined, quite literally, and their union produced the first generation of truly divine beings, the Titans, the Cyclops, and the Hectonocheires, giants with 50 heads and 100 arms each. You can't make this up, except the Greeks did, and it's amazing. But it wasn't a happy family. Uranus, fearing the power of his monstrous children, shoved them deep into Tartarus, imprisoning them within Gaia's own body, which understandably made her pretty furious. In her rage, Gaia fashioned a sickle made of adamant and turned to her children. "Who among you," she asked, "will rise against your father?" Only Cronus, the youngest Titan, was brave or reckless enough to answer the call. He ambushed Uranus and in a grisly act of cosmic rebellion, castrated him. The blood that spilled birthed more entities, the Furies, the Giants, the Meliae, or tree spirits. And from the sea foam that frothed up around Uranus's severed contribution, Aphrodite was born. Yes, Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty, was literally born of violence and sea foam. Next time you see a commercial featuring her, just remember, Greek mythology is not G-rated. With Uranus overthrown, Cronus became the new ruler of the cosmos. But this wasn't a happily ever after. Not yet. Not even close. Because just like his father, Cronus would be haunted by prophecy and the fear of his own children. So begins the cycle of rebellion, power, and paranoia that will echo through the generations of gods. Up next, we'll meet Cronus, his infamous appetite, and the rise of Zeus. So where were we? Yes, Cronus had just overthrown his father Uranus, and one of the most violent origin stories of all time. But while he'd won the throne of the cosmos, he'd also inherited something else, a curse. Uranus's final words were a prophecy. One day Cronus, too, would be overthrown by one of his own children. Now, if you're a wise ruler in myth or in life, you'd take this as a warning to lead with grace, break the cycle, be better. But Cronus doubled down. When his wife, yes, his sister too, because it's Greek mythology and that's how these things go, Rhea gave birth, Cronus greeted each of his newborns with open arms, and then he swallowed them whole. Which, let's be honest, is one way to avoid being overthrown. Not a good way, but it's a way. He devoured Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. One by one, before they even had a chance to cry, Rhea, understandably horrified, was begging him to stop. But he refused. That prophecy haunted him. So when Rhea became pregnant again with her sixth child, she decided it was time to pull a fast one. She gave birth in secret on the island of Crete and entrusted the baby, Zeus, to a band of nymphs and a magical goat named Almathea. Yes, a literal nanny goat. That's the kind of parenting you get in the ancient world. To cover her tracks, Rhea wrapped a stone in swaddling clothes and handed it to Cronus, who, true to form, gulped it down without a second thought. Apparently, Cronus wasn't exactly the most observant guy, because, baby-shaped rock, delicious. Zeus, meanwhile, was raised in secret, nurtured on honey and goat's milk, protected by the Curetes, which were dancers who clashed their spears to drown out his cries. And he grew strong, cunning, and full of fire. When he came of age, he sought the help of Metis, the Titaness of wisdom. She prepared a potion disguised as wine, a divine ipaca, really, and Zeus, disguised as a cupbearer, served it to Cronus. The result? Let's just say it would be one mythological mess. Cronus vomited up his 5 children, fully grown and still divine. Out came Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. And just like that, Zeus had siblings and an army. Together they rose up against the Titans in a war that would shake the very foundations of the world, the Titanomachy. The Titanomachy lasted 10 years, a divine civil war between the new gods, led by Zeus, and the old order, led by Cronus and his fellow Titans. At first, it wasn't going well. The Olympians were powerful, yes, but the Titans had strength, size, and centuries of experience on their side. It was like sending a startup against a Fortune 500 company. Brave, idealistic, and probably doomed. But then, Zeus made a bold move. He descended into Tartarus, the deepest part of the underworld, and freed the Cyclops and the Hectonocheires, the very beings Uranus had once imprisoned out of fear. In gratitude, the Cyclops gifted the Olympians weapons of unimaginable power. For Zeus, the thunderbolt. For Poseidon, the trident. And for Hades, the helm of darkness, which rendered him invisible. Yes, you're hearing this right. The gods were essentially gearing up like an ancient Greek Avengers team. With their new weapons, the tide of war began to turn. But it wasn't brute strength that ended the Titanomachy. It was strategy. Some say it was the work of Prometheus, a Titan who defected to Zeus's side. Others say it was simply divine fate. In the final battle, the 100-handed ones hurled boulders like hail, so many and so furious that the Titans thought that the very mountains were crashing down. Defeated, the Titans were cast into Tartarus, locked away beneath unbreakable chains, and guarded for eternity. Well, except for Atlas, who received a special punishment. As the general of the Titan forces, he was sentenced to hold up the sky on his shoulders. Forever. Imagine the worst group project you've ever been a part of, and then imagine being forced to carry it literally forever. That's Atlas for you. With the Titans defeated, the cosmos had a new king, Zeus. But peace wouldn't last long, because even among the gods, well, especially among the gods, power invites challenge. And the next threat? It wouldn't come from the Titans. It would come from something far more terrifying. Next, we'll enter the halls of Mount Olympus, meet the diverse cast of gods and goddesses, and explore how they mirror both beautifully and disturbingly our own human nature. With the Titans defeated and the cosmos in need of order, Zeus and his siblings did what all good rulers eventually do. They organized. But they didn't just split up the chores like a celestial chore wheel. No, this was the founding of Mount Olympus, the divine seat of power, and the beginning of the Olympian pantheon. Zeus, of course, claimed the sky because thunderbolts don't exactly scream subtlety. Poseidon took the sea. Hades got the underworld. More on that awkward division of labor later. And Earth, well, Gaia was still technically the Earth, so shared custody, I guess. Together, the 12 Olympians formed a dysfunctional, powerful, and deeply symbolic family. Each god or goddess wasn't just a character in a myth, they were archetypes, embodying major aspects of life, nature, and the human condition. Let's go ahead and meet them. Zeus, king of the gods. He's the ruler of the sky, wielder of lightning, and enforcer of justice. He's also, let's be honest, kind of a mess. His love life makes modern soap operas look tame. If there was a family tree of Zeus's romantic escapades, it'd need its own zip code. But at his core, Zeus represents order, law, and power. He punishes oath breakers, rewards the pious, and rules not just with force, but with diplomacy, most of the time. Now Hera, queen of the gods, she's the goddess of marriage and childbirth, but ironically also the most betrayed wife in mythology. Hera's stories often portray her as jealous and vengeful, and can you blame her? She's married to Zeus. But Hera is also regal, fiercely protective of her role and her dignity. She embodies the complicated expectations placed on women, loyalty, strength, composure, even when the system is stacked against them. Poseidon, god of the sea, moody, volatile, and deeply powerful. Poseidon is the personification of the ocean's duality, its bounty and its fury. He causes earthquakes, tames horses, and rules over sea creatures both beautiful and monstrous. He's also the original salty sibling, still a little bitter about not getting the sky. And then there's Hades, lord of the underworld. Now, pop culture loves to paint Hades as evil. Looking at you, Disney's Hercules. But Greek myth is a little more nuanced. Hades isn't the devil. He doesn't tempt or torment souls. He just runs the place, quietly, efficiently. He's the god of the afterlife, wealth, and the unseen. A somber figure who keeps to himself, mostly, and honestly, he might be the most responsible of all of the brothers. Demeter is the goddess of agriculture. Demeter is the grain giver, the nurturer, and the bringer of seasons. Her grief over her daughter Persephone, who who was taken to the underworld by Hades, explains why winter exists. Basically, ancient Greece's version of seasonal depression comes with a full myth attached. Demeter reminds us that the rhythms of life, growth, loss, and return are sacred. Athena, goddess of wisdom and war, the strategic kind of war, was born fully grown from Zeus's head after he swallowed her mother. Yes, that is what happened. Athena is logic, justice, and cleverness personified. She favors heroes who think before they act. Odysseus, for instance. And she's fiercely loyal to those who show courage and cunning. Think of her as the original Hermione Granger, but with a spear and an owl. Ares, god of war, the ragey kind, he's the embodiment of bloodlust, fury, and conflict. Unlike Athena, Ares represents the chaos of battle, the screaming, the carnage, the senseless destruction. Even the other gods didn't like him much. He's that guy who picks a fight at weddings, often seen with Eris, sister, the goddess of strife, and a trail of regrettable decisions. Apollo, god of the sun, music, and prophecy. He's charming, cultured, and golden in every sense. Apollo plays the lyre, heals the sick, inspires poets, and also occasionally kills people with plague arrows. He's complex like that. He's the god of rationality, light, and balance. And his oracle at Delphi became one of the most famous spiritual centers in the ancient world. Artemis, goddess of the hunt and the moon. This is Apollo's twin sister. She's wild, untamed, and fiercely independent. Protector of young women and animals, patron of forests and nighttime. She demands respect, and if you violate her sacred spaces, well, let's just say a guy once turned into a stag and was then torn apart by his own hunting dogs. Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty, born from the sea foam and divine drama, Aphrodite represents desire in all its forms. Romantic, physical, and sometimes disastrous. She can unite lovers, but can also spark wars. Looking at you, Helena Troy. Aphrodite isn't just about romance. She's about the power of attraction and the chaos that often follows it. Hephaestus, god of fire and forge, he's the divine blacksmith, crippled from birth but brilliant in craftsmanship. He builds palaces, weapons, and even mechanical servants. He's also married to Aphrodite, which goes about as well as you'd imagine. Hephaestus is basically ancient Greece's answer to Tony Stark, if Tony lived in a volcano and had constant marital issues. Dionysus is the god of wine, madness, and theater. Last but never least, Dionysus is the god of ecstasy, illusion, and transformation. He blurs boundaries between man and beast, order and chaos, sacred and profane. He's worshipped in frenzied rituals. His followers are dancing through the night in states of divine intoxication. He represents the truth that sometimes, to find clarity, you have to lose control. Each of these gods and goddesses reflected not only the world as the Greeks saw it, but the inner lives of humans, our brilliance, our pettiness, our contradictions. They were immortal, yes, but also deeply relatable, flawed, passionate, proud, and sometimes terrifying. In the next section of our journey, we're going to descend from the heights of Olympus to the clay of the earth, where humans were shaped, fire was stolen, and a flood would wash the world clean. Now that the Olympian gods are firmly in power, the question becomes, what about us? Where do humans fit into this divine drama? To answer that, we have to meet a Titan who managed to survive the fall of his kind, not by brute strength or cunning ambition, but by siding with the winners. His name was Prometheus, and he was, depending on the source, the creator, teacher, and ultimate protector of mankind. In some versions of the myth, Prometheus is literally the sculptor of humanity. He forms us from clay and water, molding figures in the shape of the gods, but earthbound and fragile. His brother, Epimetheus, helps by assigning traits to the animals: speed, strength, fur, flight. But when it comes time to equip humans, there's nothing left. So Prometheus does what every older sibling eventually does: fixes it. He gives humanity its greatest gift: fire. Now, fire isn't just warmth and cooking. In Greek thought, fire is symbolic of knowledge, technology, and civilization itself. It's power, and Prometheus gave it to us against the explicit command of Zeus. This is the part where you can cue dramatic music and imagine Prometheus sneaking up Mount Olympus in a hoodie like he's about to pull off a divine heist, Ocean's 11, but make it myth. Prometheus doesn't stop there. He also teaches humans how to sacrifice to the gods and how to trick them. He famously hides the best cuts of meat under bones and fat during a ritual offering, while presenting the lean parts to Zeus, as if to say, "This is for you." Zeus, needless to say, is not amused. He sees Prometheus's actions not as clever or compassionate, but as defiance, a threat to divine order. And Zeus responds the way Greek gods usually do when their authority is challenged, with cosmic-level punishment. First, he takes vengeance on humanity. He withholds fire. Again. Prometheus steals it. Again. And so Zeus changes tactics. He creates a gift for mankind, a woman. Her name, Pandora, crafted by Hephaestus and adorned by Aphrodite, taught music and speech by Apollo and Hermes. Pandora was a masterpiece, a living and breathing Trojan horse. She was given a jar, often mistranslated as a box, and she was told not to open it. And you can probably guess what happened next. When she lifted the lid, all the evils of the world escaped. Disease, toil, sorrow, jealousy, despair, and only hope remained at the bottom of the jar. Yes, the ancient Greeks had the original version of the "don't push the red button" in surprise. Someone pushed it. Pandora's story reflects the Greek view that suffering is inseparable from human existence. And it's not that we fell from grace, like in the biblical tradition, but that we were always flawed and always struggling. But Prometheus still had a price to pay. Zeus had him chained to a rock far in the east, where every day an eagle, sacred to Zeus, would swoop down and tear out his liver. And every night it would grow back, immortal, in pain, forever. So yeah, being the friend of man comes with a very rough benefits package. Yet Prometheus becomes one of mythology's most enduring symbols of rebellion, sacrifice, and the pursuit of enlightenment. He's a kind of ancient rebel archetype, part martyr, part whistleblower, part misunderstood genius. He defied tyranny to elevate the powerless, and in doing so, he lit a fire, literally and figuratively, that would never be extinguished. There's something deeply human in the figure of Prometheus. Our constant desire to reach higher, to learn more, to shape our world, even if it angers the gods. But in the myths of ancient Greece, there's always a cost for overstepping. And when humanity steps too far, the gods don't just punish an individual. Sometimes they flood the whole world. Next, we'll explore the Greek flood story, how Zeus once wiped out the entire human race, and how it echoes another flood story you might already know. So far, the gods have shaped the cosmos, established order, and even given humanity the divine spark of fire, only to punish us for using it. But when human wickedness multiplies beyond even the gods' tolerance, the myths tell us that something drastic happens. Something cleansing. Something global. They send a flood. Sound familiar? In the Greek myth, the story begins not with sin in the garden, but with the arrogance on earth. As generations passed after the age of Prometheus, the humans became corrupt, violent, and impious. They stopped honoring the gods, they broke sacred laws, they committed atrocities against guests and kin, and Zeus, watching from Olympus, decided that humanity had become unworthy. So he does what ancient gods often do. He hits the reset button. Think of it like turning the world off and back on again, but with a lot more drowning. But before we get to the storm, let's talk about one couple, Deucalion and Pyrrha. Deucalion was the son of Prometheus. Yes, that Prometheus. And he inherited not just his father's brain, but also his moral compass. He was pious, just, and wise. His wife, Pyrrha, the daughter of Epimetheus and Pandora, was equally faithful. When Zeus decided to destroy humanity, he warned Deucalion, either through a dream, an oracle, or Prometheus himself, depending on which version you read. The couple built a chest or ark, yes, that word again, and climbed aboard as the storm broke loose. Rain poured for 9 days and nights. The rivers overflowed, the seas rose, mountains disappeared beneath the waves. All of mankind, save for the two, was wiped away. When the waters finally receded, their ark came to rest on Mount Parnassus, a sacred mountain not far from Delphi. Yes, the Greeks had their own version of Noah's Ark, and it comes complete with a mountaintop landing. But unlike Noah, Deucalion and Pyrrha didn't just walk out and repopulate the earth the old-fashioned way. No, this is Greek mythology. Weirdness is required. They prayed to the goddess Themis, asking how to restore the human race. Themis gave them a cryptic instruction. Cover your heads and throw the bones of your mother over your shoulders. Now, most of us would call that a red flag, but Deucalion, being a mythological hero, interpreted it symbolically. Mother meant Mother Earth, Gaia, and her bones, stones. So they picked up stones, cast them behind themselves, and as they hit the ground, the stones transformed. Those thrown by Deucalion became men, and those thrown by Pyrrha became women. That's one way to people the planet again. Quirky, efficient, and environmentally friendly. Now, here's where things get even more interesting. This isn't just a Greek story. Flood myths appear all over the ancient world, in Sumerian, Mesopotamian, Indian, Chinese, and of course, biblical texts. Let's look briefly at one of the best-known parallels, the Genesis flood. In the Hebrew Bible, God sees that the earth is filled with violence and corruption. He chooses Noah, a righteous man, to build an ark. He brings his family and 2 of every creature aboard. The flood comes, lasting 40 days and nights, and when the waters subside, the ark comes to rest on Mount Ararat. God makes a covenant with Noah, placing a rainbow in the sky as a symbol of his promise. The parallels are striking. A divine being sees human corruption and responds with a flood. A righteous man is spared. He builds a vessel, survives with his wife, and lands on a mountain. A new humanity begins from them. So what does this tell us? Maybe ancient people across the world experienced catastrophic floods and tried to explain them. Or maybe these stories reflect a shared psychological need to believe that after disaster, there is renewal. That judgment can lead to redemption. That even when the world is washed clean, hope remains. In both the Greek and biblical stories, it's not just the flood that matters. It's what comes next. The world doesn't end in water, it begins again in mercy. Flood myths remind us that the line between myth and memory is sometimes blurred. That stories born thousands of years and thousands of miles apart can echo the same truths. Whether we read them as a metaphor, warning, or divine revelation, they ask us the same questions. How should we live? What happens when we lose our way? And can we ever truly start over? Thanks for joining me on this journey through the Greek creation mythos on Ancient Echoes. If you enjoyed this episode, consider sharing it with a friend who loves history, and be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. In our next episode, we're going to shift our gaze from the heavens and the floods to the everyday lives of the ancient Greeks, their politics, philosophy, and poetry, and the ways their world still shapes ours. Until then, remember, from the beginning of time, humanity has turned to stories not just to understand the world, but to survive it.